Hey everybody, Jason Burmis here, and you know I call them like I see them. And when somebody in the mainstream media actually does a good piece, no matter how much of an establishment, mouthpiece, propagandist they've been over the years, we give them credit. We'll show that piece. And they have an amazing piece on Jeffrey Epstein right now. However, before I get into any of that, when I make a mistake, I own up to it. I don't try to cover it up. I don't say it's a big conspiracy. When I get something wrong, I openly talk about it. Now, earlier today, I did a video on Robert Mueller and George Nader, and I had Bill Clinton in there. And I had Bill Clinton in there because there was a bunch of reports around that this George Nader, who is a George Nader next to Bill Clinton, was the same George Nader that today was picked up for trafficking a 14-year-old boy. And there were several different articles out there about this. It's gone around. And why I chose this one was because it also had embedded an open secret inside. And I like an open secret's work. I think they've done good things over the years. They're not perfect. I'm not perfect. But I really do like the things they've done. And as you can see, they had a large thread. And I also wanted to read from that thread and show his connections to Elliot Browdy, okay? But in that, once again, I made a mistake. This is not correct. And the crazy thing is, this is a big story. An open secret shows you this. And it was, put out there by the Q crew. And a lot of people, I'm not going to, dive in on Q and all that, but this is why that kind of information is dangerous. If you look at the origins of where this comes from, et cetera, it is from those groups, and it is a separate George Nader. So I wanted to get that out of the way to begin. On to Anderson Cooper. Okay, so what is so great about this piece? Well, first of all, it gets in with Bradley Edwards, the lawyer for many of these victims now for many years, his private investigator. Now, I've not seen the private investigator on television yet. And some of the things he tells just really give it a human face. For instance, he talks about, and this isn't really discussed. I mean, you're going to hear it from him, but he talks about the fact that when these girls, started getting out of braces, started becoming women, that's when he used them as recruiters or pawned them off on other people, okay? He talked about how one of the 13-year-old girls in what we now know is 40-plus victims in that initial Florida case, even though she was 13, she looked like she was 9, he said. He said she looked like, that really gut punch. And he knows that, this is a guy that can't stop. On top of that, as a private investigator, he seems to be the source of this information, at least the initial source of this information, that while Epstein had this sweetheart deal and was on quote-unquote work release, and remember, they've opened up an internal affairs investigation into that, well, he was watching all these women come in. And he gets asked, were they of age? Were they not of age? And he's like, I can't tell you for sure. I don't have the identities of all those women. So we're going to have to stop it a lot because it is CNN and I don't want a copyright strike. But again, I'm going to give Anderson Cooper credit for this piece. It's very good.
The Palm Beach County Sheriff said today that he's ordered an internal investigation into his own office's supervision of Jeffrey Epstein while the registered sex offender was serving a 13-month jail sentence for state prostitution-related charges back in 2008 and 2009. This, he says, to see if any rules or regulations were violated. Epstein was granted work release privileges during that time, which allowed him to spend 12 hours a day, 6 days a week at an office.
So let's
it's
stop
an arrangement that has certainly come under...
Let's just stop it right there. Of course, 100% it was inappropriate. Just the deal alone, and we all know it. And, he was paying the money. This is a billionaire. Do you not think he was going to be able to grease the wheels in a program that he already manipulated? Again, I've questioned how often he was actually checking into the jail. I'm sure he had, they talk about a private wing of the jail. And even though this doesn't focus in on the foreign passport, the intelligence connections, Maxwell, etc., this private investigator really, again, puts a face on this. And I'm not sure, is this damage control now? Is that what this is? I mean, the cat's out of the bag. Is this let's hammer home and really go after Epstein and forget about the connections. I mean, the connections to other people are not made here, but again, I think this is an important piece.
There's some harsh scrutiny, especially in the light of Epstein's arrest on federal sex trafficking charges to which he's entered a plea of not guilty. He's been denied bail. Tonight, our Drew Griffin brings to light some pretty remarkable new information in the Epstein case. It's the first television interview with a private investigator who's been tracking Epstein for more than a decade.
And again, this is why this is important. I haven't seen this guy anywhere else. I'm sure he has a lot more information that's in this, now 4-minute, soundbite piece. But again, what he says is it's disturbing. It, again, puts a huge face on this. It shows how the network of recruiters and procurers worked. Remember, if you look at that Jane Doe 43 lawsuit and you see the names of Leslie Groff, Natalia Malyshev, Sarah Kalin, I would assume that, at least 2 of those women are the quote-unquote employee 1, 2, and 3 that are now in the new indictment that we read here.
Here's Drew's report.
Mike Fiston was a cop for 30 years, homicide detective, worked narcotics. He'd seen it all and thought he'd retire to an easy life as a private detective in South Florida. His first case, brought to him by an attorney 10 years ago. Investigate Jeffrey Epstein.
Can you imagine that? You retire as a cop after 30 years, and the first case you get is this case.
I started going out and interviewing witnesses that became victims. I was interviewing one after another. The 3 girls turned into 4 girls, turned into 5, 6, 7, and so on. I couldn't help but think that this could have been my daughter, or your daughter, or my next door neighbor's daughter.
The case is now infamous.
And by the way, listen to his voice. I mean, this isn't a guy that really wants to be out in the public. He's an ex-cop that's kind of now being thrust in there. And you can hear the cracking in his voice, how disturbing it is even to talk about now.
A secret sweetheart deal with federal prosecutors, a slap on the wrist jail sentence from the state of Florida.
If you had to see the pain on their faces when they found out about this plea deal, not only that, the fear factor that he was going to be out was pretty tremendous.
So let's talk about
that. He and attorney Brad Edwards.
So that's Bradley Edwards. That's the man that's beat Epstein in court, that got him to give him an undisclosed amount of money, sign over a statement, and basically did that the day of jury selection. That's about, I believe that was either back in, I don't know, 6 to 8 months ago. Again, we've been covering it for so long. If you want to see some of the older videos, just keep scrolling down. And we've been covering this Epstein case ad nauseum for quite some time. I mean, it's broke out big now. But if you want to see his connections to, media personalities after the fact, if you want to see who he's donating to in his little secret charities, we've covered it all. All right. So again, Edwards beats him. This is the lawyer. These women were scared.
Edwards sought justice through civil suits on behalf of alleged victims, winning settlements against the multimillionaire. Victims were so young, he says it's inconceivable those in Epstein's social circles could not have at least suspected the girls were underage.
Thank you. And again, this cop sitting there going, inconceivable that his inner circle couldn't have at least suspected they were underage.
Once these girls lost their braces and their pubescent look, and they started becoming 16 years old or 17 years old, they were too old for him. So then he started using them for recruiters to bring the younger girls.
Epstein did plead guilty in 2008 to 2 state charges, including procuring a person under 18 for prostitution.
Yeah, and once again, there's no such thing as a child prostitute. And everybody thought and assumed that, it was a 14-year-old because that was the initial claim. Turns out it was a 16-year-old. We didn't find out until the DOJ reopened that case. And a video I did 4 months ago on this, we found out 4 months ago now that happened, guys, that he didn't have to register as a sex offender in 30 states. See that there's a little graph right there, here? It has 512 views. I need your help. I need you to share this stuff on social media, in Reddit, on your blogs, through email chains, because this information needs to get out. Even today, people don't understand the severity of this deal. There's no such thing as a child prostitute.
a charge so demeaning to the children he victimized, Fiston says it silenced many of them.
These were girls that were not of age of consent in the state of Florida. They couldn't be prostitutes.
One victim told Fiston she was just 13 when it started.
But she looked like she was 9.
But she looked like she was 9. A 13-year-old girl that looked like she was 9. Ugh.
And she started telling me the whole story about how, you know, she tried to live a good life. She was blaming herself for what Jeffrey did to her. And she was in such pain, this girl, that, listen, nothing really phases me after spending like 13 years in homicide. Nothing really fazed me anymore. But that really fazed me. I mean, I teared up during this.
Court documents obtained by CNN detail how Epstein intimidated, frightened, and threatened potential witnesses against him, including the girls he had abused. The U.S. Attorney's Office knew the FBI was investigating, but chose not to prosecute. Fiston witnessed that harassment firsthand.
He hired.
So now we're going to talk about the harassment of these young girls that were just turning into women. That had a very powerful man that may have been connected to intelligence, was totally connected to billionaires, was flying them all over the country and the world, passing them off to his friends, having them pimp out other young girls.
Private investigators, and all their job was to follow the girls around and intimidate them. They were on their bumpers everywhere they went. They pull into a gas station, they pull up behind them. They pull up to a grocery store, they pull up behind them.
So this is happening while he's supposedly serving his 13 months?
While he's serving it and after he gets out.
So again, the entire time he's serving his time in jail, he's got private investigators harassing the victims. This is the kind of behavior that a guy like Dershowitz encourages, okay? Especially when he's named as one of the suspects. I promise you.
While he's on probation.
You know, if you're looking at this from a law and justice point of view, whatever that prosecution was, doesn't sound like it sent any message to Jeffrey Epstein.
Well, it did send a message. You could do what you want.
Yes!
And no one's going to mess with you.
Yes!
And Fiston
that
says,
is the message. You can do what you want and no one's going to mess with you. This is a long fight. Fight's not over. The connections aren't all out. The other people aren't arrested. The victims haven't seen justice yet. Justice is taking down the network, all right? Taking down the high-level elite pedophiles out there. Justice is getting the George Naders and his buddies of the world. I mean, this is a guy that got prosecuted in 1990. He got prosecuted in 2003. He just got picked up for CP a couple months ago or a month ago. And now we're getting him for a 14-year-old boy. Why isn't he just in jail? Why aren't they all just in jail? I don't understand it.
anyone watching Epstein during his 13-month jail sentence would have seen Epstein being allowed to leave jail during the day, head to his office, where young women would come and go.
So now here's the new allegation. We already know one woman has come forward. She says she was of age when she was with Epstein. But now the private investigator is going to talk about this current probe.
They were bringing lavish lunches and food into his office.
And you saw girls going in?
Saw girls going in.
Underage?
Couldn't tell if they were underage or not.
They look young?
They look very young.
You have no doubt he's been abusing since his plea?
Oh, absolutely. He can't stop.
Epstein's attorney says Jeffrey Epstein has had a spotless record since he got out of jail in 2010.
You mentioned you have proof that just recently he's been abusing girls. What is the proof?
Well, we had some people come forward.
And you have their names?
I have their names, and we've turned that information over to the federal authorities.
So again, we have even more recent charges. The current charges are out of New York, okay, 2002 to 2005. They involve Florida and New Mexico. Apparently, there may be another investigation into New Mexico. And now, in the first interview this guy has ever done, he's saying that they now have new victims from recently as well. I knew the judge wasn't going to let him out, but I again hope that this information helps bring down this entire ring. And again, props to Anderson Cooper for putting that on there. Is it damage control? Is it a little too late? I don't know that any of this is a little too late. We need as much information out in the public arena as possible. And I think that, other interviews with this investigator are going to reveal even more details that the public is still not aware of. So if you like what I do, guys, I do 3, 4, 5, 6, sometimes 7 videos a day on various subjects. If you haven't seen my latest Seth Rich, Seymour Hersh, Assange in a Dropbox video, it is a must-watch. I encourage you to go check that out. Neuralink, DARPA technology, Bohemian Grove, human microchipping, biometrics, facial recognition, Bohemian Grove, like I said, Bilderberg Group, and more. We cover it all here with your help. It's not about left or right. It's always been about right and wrong. And I've got a GoFundMe. It's doing well right now. I can't thank you guys enough. We're doing it once a month so that I can continue to bring you videos 7 days a week. So again, please like, share, sub, and hit that notification. And everybody, I will see you on the flip side.